Now let's talk with Bishop Lee. Bishop Lee, it's a joy to have you with us.
Thank you.
I must ask you to take us back on that journey at the time when your son Jonathan was born without a left hand.
Yeah.
In many respects, that event helped redefine your sense of faith.
Absolutely.
And understanding that only a suffering God can help.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about Jonathan now and how he's still teaching?
Jonathan is a sophomore in college and has been teaching me since the day he was born, clearly. When he was a young child, and inevitably we encountered other children and their very abrupt questions and stares, Jonathan began to teach us about what it is to be comfortable in your own skin. Not untypical answer when some little kid would ask him, "What happened to your hand?" was simply and matter-of-factly, "I was born that way," sometimes followed with a quick, "Get over it." And as he grew, that sense of security in his own self, in his own skin, the skin into which he was born and occupies, taught me much about not needing to polish it up. We all have imperfections. We all have wounds. We all have parts of ourselves that we think are less presentable, parts of our personality, parts of our psyche. And life is not about keeping those things under careful wraps. Life, the spiritual life, life with God, I think, is about embracing them, allowing God to embrace them. I think that's central to the Christian message. In Christ, God has embraced the full range of human experience.
And yet it's a real challenge, isn't it? This idea of perfectionism. I love that you spoke about this. This is something I certainly struggle with sometimes too, thinking if I can do it well enough or refine it enough that there's some value in that. Do you think we're led to think that good church is a perfect goal for people in their experience, that they're there to refine themselves in a way rather than to come to God as a wounded person?
I do. I think a lot of Christianity for far too long has been a kind of self-improvement project. Okay. The Lambeth Conference this last summer, which gathers bishops from throughout the worldwide Anglican Communion at Canterbury, was led in retreat. The bishops were led in retreat by the Archbishop of Canterbury, who said something arresting, very important. He said, "Holiness does not depend on our moral perfection. Holiness is not something we get to achieve. Holiness is a matter of God reaching out to grasp us and to draw us into God's own project of making the world into the whole reality it's meant to be. We get to cooperate with that. And as such, offering our best, offering the best of our gifts, working on ourselves, none of that's anti-Christian. The mistake is thinking that that work is what brings the holiness about. Holiness is God's gift to us. Wholeness is God's gift. Health, salvos, all those words are related. God's gift. And our response is a matter of accepting the gift that's on offer and cooperating with it. But the energy comes from God.
Mm-hmm. And God's intervention into the human condition you were referring to earlier promises to us that although God does not prevent disasters or death, that God is in them. Always in them, present. God is not absent from those moments in our lives. How did you and your wife together learn to trust the journey? And I wonder how your journey has changed and how the wounds have changed.
It's very, those are very compelling questions. The first answer is how did we learn, how did we walk through it, is very simple. It was the church. It was the community of faith, and church construed quite broadly, not necessarily the people who were members of our parish, but the large group of circle of friends, some of whom practice their faith overtly, some of whom would be startled to hear us say that they were people of faith, but they demonstrated it in the way they came around us, trying to surround us, not by telling us it was all right, but simply by being there. I'll never forget the deep wisdom a friend of mine, several years after Jonathan's birth, gave me. A young couple who had a baby girl who died very suddenly, 10 days old. and talk about wounding. There's no way to describe or capture that kind of wound. And I'll never forget, she said to me, we didn't start to get through this. Not get over it. You never get over it. We didn't start to get through this into some kind of health again until we stopped wanting the pain to go away. It was a profoundly wise thing to say. The wounds of the risen Jesus in that story about Jesus and Thomas, he's risen, but the wounds are still recognizably there. The wounds of having anything taken from you hardly ever go away if it's an important wounding, but they can cease bleeding to death. The scars are the sign, and those you bear always. I think you bear them eternally.
I have to ask you, Jeff, these are wonderful personal questions. I want to pull it out to a macro level a little bit. We've got about 2 minutes left.
Yep.
As a bishop, can you help us understand what's going on in the Episcopal Church with the schism, and what do you think the future of that dialogue is? It's in the news. Anyone that's following this has an idea of what I'm talking about, but what can you bring to it? You mentioned the Lambeth Conference. I'm sure there was a lot of discussion.
One of the things I learned at the Lambeth Conference was the importance, now more than ever, of face-to-face dialogue between parts of the world that find our different cultural, social worldview, contexts, almost unimaginable. I said to a friend recently that interacting with bishops from certain parts of Africa and trying to have a conversation about our different perspectives on social issues, theological issues, I realized with a start that we were living on different planets. And the friend of mine said that's why interplanetary travel is more important than ever. Mm-hmm. And you can't do it on the internet. Mm-hmm. So much of the division in our church, and I think more broadly, is being fueled by a kind of irresponsible use of instant technology. We know more about each other today within seconds than ever before, clearly. And the kind of face-to-face trust building, relationship building, there's no substitute for that in the flesh, face-to-face. We've got to do much more of that. I think we're discovering the full richness of the global reality. I think we have to stop trying to change each other and learn more about each other. And the Anglican Communion that the Episcopal Church is part of is as much of emerging post-modernity, that deeply diverse world, as any other organization or church.
We are grateful for your amazing leadership and vision, Bishop Jeffrey Lee.
Thank you.